You open your electric bill in late January. The paper is cold from the mailbox. You pull the sheet out, and right there on the bottom line, it is up $60 from last month. You look over at that little plastic space heater humming in the corner of your bedroom. You know it is costing you money. And if you read the news, you know every winter we hear stories of those cheap cords melting. Wall fires starting while families sleep. Now I want you to sit with this. For $5 at a local hardware store, you can buy a solid block of high-alumina clay that will keep your feet or your bed warm for 8 straight hours. It uses zero electricity. It cannot catch fire. It will never short-circuit. And your grandfather likely had one in his home. My name is Levi Stoltzfuss. I am Amish, and I farm in Lancaster County, Pennsylvania. Today we are going to talk about staying warm. I will be honest with you right at the start, the way I always am. This $5 trick will not heat a 500 square foot living room. It does not heat the empty air. It heats you, but honest is better than impressive. If you use this right, you will never need to plug a plastic heater into your bedroom wall again. The English buy these plastic heaters from the big stores all winter long. The heaters run hard. They wear out in 2 years, and they go in the trash. But if you unfold the little paper manual that comes in the box, there is a strict warning printed right inside. It tells you to never, ever plug that heater into a power strip. We will look at why that is later. First, let us look at what you are actually doing when you plug that box into the wall. You know the smell, I mean. You flip the switch, it smells like burning dust for a minute, and then the fan starts blowing. Most of those units pull a 1500 watt draw. They are working to heat the air in the room, but air is thin. As soon as the glowing coil turns off, the cold draft from the floorboards pulls that warm air right out the window sash. 2 winters ago, a neighbor of mine brought his power bill over to my kitchen table. He lives in a farmhouse built in the 1920s, and he had been running a space heater in his bedroom every night to fight the draft. He was angry about the cost. I told him he should not be surprised. The Department of Energy tracks this sort of thing. If you run a standard 1500 watt electric space heater for 8 hours a day, it adds roughly $40 to $60 to your monthly electric bill. That depends on your local kilowatt hour rate, of course, but you are paying that $50 penalty every month just to keep the chill off your toes while the room stays drafty. That is the money side of the plastic box. The safety side is heavy. The National Fire Protection Association puts out a report on home heating fires. They look at the hard numbers from firehouses across the country. They found that space heaters only account for about 1/3 of home heating fires. That sounds manageable. Until you read the next line down. Those same space heaters are responsible for nearly 80% of home heating fire deaths. 80%. It happens because people fall asleep. The thin wire inside the wall gets hot. The plastic casing melts. Or a heavy quilt drifts off the bed and settles over the humming coils. To stop paying for dangerous heat, we have to look backward. We have to look at how people survived the cold nights before the grid existed. They did not try to heat the empty air in the room. They looked for something solid. My grandfather used to talk about the winters before the power lines came out this way in the 1930s. The farmhouses were drafty. By January, the wind would push right through the chinking in the walls. If you slept in an upstairs bedroom, you woke up with frost on the inside of the window glass. To survive a harsh winter night, they used soapstone bed warmers, or they used heavy carriage bricks. If my grandfather was taking a wagon to town in the deep snow, my grandmother heated flat stones on the cook stove. She wrapped them in heavy cloth and put them under his boots on the floorboards. The heat would seep up through the leather all the way to town, keeping his blood warm even when the wind was howling. They understood thermal mass. Air loses heat. The second a draft hits it, a solid object holds it tight. I am standing next to my kitchen cook stove. We baked bread earlier, and the fire is burning down to coals. The iron top is still hot. If you hold your hand 6 inches above it, You can feel the warmth pushing back at you. That is radiant heat. We want to capture that. I have a brick right here in my hand. It is pale yellow, almost white. It weighs about 4 pounds. It feels like a solid piece of earth. It clinks, dull and hard when I set it down on the iron. This is a refractory firebrick. Do not confuse this with a red clay brick you would use to build a chimney or a garden wall. A standard red brick is fine for building, but it will eventually crack and split if you heat it up and cool it down too many times on a stove. This refractory brick is different. It is made from high-alumina clay mixed with silica. I don't know the chemistry name for it. I know what it does. That specific mixture gives it exceptional thermal mass. These are the same bricks we use to line the inside of a wood-burning furnace. They can sit directly inside a blazing firebox and never shatter. The clay absorbs intense heat. It eats it up. Then it turns around and releases that heat very, very slowly over many hours. It acts just like a battery. You fill it with heat from the stove, and you draw that heat out while you sleep. But capturing the heat is only safe if you choose the exact right stone. Some folks read about these old ways, and they try to cut a corner. They walk down to the creek bed and pick up a large river rock, or they find an old piece of concrete block out behind the barn. They think any heavy stone will do the job. Do not do this. Concrete is porous. It will crumble under high heat. Worse, it will off-gas chemical fumes as it bakes. You do not want to be breathing that in a closed bedroom. The river rock is a much more dangerous mistake. A smooth stone pulled from the water looks completely solid to the eye, but it is full of tiny microscopic fissures. Those invisible cracks trap moisture deep inside the rock. When you take a river stone and set it on a hot stove top, the water trapped inside boils and turns to steam. Steam expands. Because the rock is solid on the outside, the steam has nowhere to go. The pressure builds up tight inside the stone until it violently explodes. I have seen what happens when a wet stone gets into a hot fire. It goes off like a shotgun. It throws hot, sharp shrapnel across the room. It will dent a tin ceiling, and it will certainly hurt a person. You do not want your wife or your children standing in the kitchen if that happens. You must use a proper kiln-fired refractory firebrick. It takes the heat safely, it holds it tight, and it stays perfectly whole. Once you have the safe brick, I will show you what you need to build this. You drive down to your local farm supply or a good hardware store. Walk past the power tools and the grilling supplies. Find the masonry aisle and look for a refractory split brick. We use the split size for this. A split brick is exactly what it sounds like. It is half the thickness of a standard brick, about 1.25 inches thick. It lays flat. It will not tip over when you move it. Take it to the counter. You will hand the clerk right around $4. That is your entire cost. You bring that brick home, and it is yours. It will never rust. It does not run on a subscription. It never expires. If you drop it on a concrete barn floor, it might chip a corner, but it will still hold heat just the same. When the winter is over, you put it in a drawer. Next winter, it works just as well. Waste nothing. Now look around your house for the rest of the materials. You need a heavy covering. You must use a thick wool blanket or a heavy cotton towel. Do not use polyester. Do not use anything synthetic, or the heat of the brick will melt the plastic fibers right into the clay. We use an old wool blanket. My wife cut down into squares when the edges got moth-eaten. It costs $0. Finally, you need heavy leather work gloves. You likely have a pair sitting in the mudroom. That costs $0. So you have $4 in parts sitting on the kitchen counter. I'll show you exactly how long to leave this on the stove in a minute. First, we need to talk about handling the stone safety word. Never, ever touch a heated firebrick with your bare hands. A refractory brick does not glow red when it is hot. It does not smoke. It looks exactly the same sitting at 400 degrees as it does sitting cold on the store shelf. If you reach out and grab it, You will burn the skin right off your palm before your brain even tells you to let go. Put your heavy leather gloves on. We take the split brick and set it right on the edge of the wood stove. You do not want it sitting dead center over the hottest flames. The iron edge is fine. If you do not heat your home with wood, you can put the cold brick right inside your kitchen oven as it cools down. When you finish baking supper and turn the gas off, slide the brick onto the oven rack and close the door. Let that residual heat bake into the clay. When the brick is hot, you pull your leather gloves back on, you lay your heavy wool blanket out flat on the table, you pick the brick up with both hands. It is heavy, and you will feel the heat pushing right through the leather. Set the brick dead center on the wool blanket. Then you fold the blanket over. You do not just drape it. You wrap it tight, fold the bottom up, bring the sides in, and roll the top over. You double wrap it like a tight package, so the hard clay is completely buried in the cloth. You do not want any exposed stone to touch your bare skin or your bed sheets. You want that wool wrapped thick. It does not just protect your skin, it changes the way the heat moves. Wool is a remarkable thing. The textile engineers who study these materials know exactly why it works. The sheep grow fibers that are crimped and rough. Those fibers overlap and trap tiny pockets of what we call dead air. When you wrap that hot clay in the wool, the heavy fabric catches the heat. It slows the radiant transfer down. Instead of the brick dumping all its heat into the room in 30 minutes and burning whatever touches it, the wool forces it to release a gentle, steady warmth. It meters the heat out over 6 to 8 hours. I told you I would explain the timing. If your wood stove is burning hot after supper, you set the bare brick on the iron edge for 20 to 30 minutes. That is enough time. If you do not heat with wood and you are using your kitchen oven, you just set the bare brick on the wire rack after you finish baking and turn the dial off. Leave the brick in there while you wash the dishes. Let the oven go completely cold. By the time you pull the brick out with your leather gloves, it has swallowed up all that residual heat that would have just faded away into the empty kitchen. When you learn these old ways, you start to see how simple it is to stay warm without relying on a wire in the wall. You stop paying twice for the same heat. If you want to keep track of these off-grid methods so you do not forget them when the power goes out, there is a guide down in the description that you can print out for your home. Keep it in a drawer. Now you take that tight wool package and carry it into the bedroom. The room might be 55 degrees. The window glass is black and cold. You pull back the heavy quilts and place the wrapped brick right at the foot of your bed. Or, if you are working at a desk paying bills, you set it on the floorboards right under your chair. You sit down and rest your stocking feet directly on top of the wool. You will feel the heat seep up through the soles of your socks within a minute. The human body's thermoregulation system is built to protect the chest and the head. It prioritizes the core. When you sit in a drafty house, your body pulls warm blood away from your fingers and your toes to keep your vital organs safe. That is why your feet always ache first on a January night. But the blood vessels in your feet sit very close to the surface of your skin. When you apply a localized heat source right there, you change the math in your body. The brick warms the blood in your feet. Your heart does the heavy lifting. It pumps that warmed blood straight back up your legs and into your core. You are effectively warming your whole body from the bottom up. You trick your circulatory system into feeling entirely comfortable even while the ambient air in the room is freezing cold. You do not need to heat the ceiling. You do not need to heat the empty corners of the room. You only need to heat the blood inside your own veins. That $5 piece of clay does the work quietly in the dark. But you have to respect the limits of the tool. Nothing is perfect, and this is no different. I will be honest with you about where this old method stops working. It requires a primary heat source to charge the clay. You must have a wood stove burning in the main room, or a coal furnace, or a gas oven that just finished baking supper. You have to have a way to fill the thermal battery before you go to sleep. If your house loses power in a hard January blizzard and you have no wood fire and no gas, a cold piece of clay sitting on your kitchen counter is just a cold piece of clay. It cannot create heat from nothing. You also have to respect the physical weight of the stone. 4 pounds of solid masonry is a lot of weight if it falls off a mattress. If you have toddlers running around or infants pulling themselves up on the bedroom furniture, you have to manage this carefully. A young child will grab the corner of a hanging wool blanket and pull it down without thinking. You cannot leave a hot, heavy brick sitting on the edge of a kitchen table where little hands can reach the cloth. You must always ensure the double wrap stays thick and secure so bare skin never touches the hot clay. But if you manage the stone well, it gives you peace of mind, and it keeps your hard-earned money in your own pocket. Think about the math over a full winter season. If you run that plastic heater in your bedroom from November clear through to March, you are paying the power company an extra $250 for the year. If you live in that old farmhouse for 10 years, you have handed the electric company $2,500. You paid them that money just to heat the empty air in a drafty room. The refractory split brick cost you roughly $4. One time, it sits quietly at the foot of the bed. When you wake up in the morning, the room is freezing cold, but you are perfectly warm. The brick is finally cool to the touch. You carry it back to the kitchen, and you set it next to the stove for the next night. You do not get that quiet peace of mind from the electric heater. I told you earlier about the paper manual that comes in the box with those plastic units. The warning printed inside in tiny letters. It strictly tells you to never plug the heater into a power strip. Stay with me on this. A power strip is built for small things. A small reading lamp on a nightstand, a clock radio. It has thin copper wire running inside that cheap plastic casing. When you plug a 1,500-watt space heater into it, the heater demands a massive amount of amperage from the wall. It pulls that heavy electrical current continuously for 8 hours on end, without taking a single break. The thin copper wire inside the power strip cannot handle that level of friction. It gets hot. Then it gets dangerously hot. The white plastic casing around the power strip begins to soften in the dark. Slowly it melts away entirely. The bare, glowing wire touches the bedroom carpet, and it sparks. That is how a family loses a home at 2 a.m. They try to stay warm, the modern way, and they pay a terrible price for it. You do not have to live with that anxiety humming in the corner of your room. You can heat the person instead of the room. You can take a few dollars to the hardware store and buy a refractory brick. You can wrap it in an old wool blanket. You can sleep the whole night through with warm feet, knowing there is no wire melting against the baseboards. Tell me in the comments, what room in your house is always the coldest in the winter? I read every single one. Next time, we are going to look at a $7 trick to stop the cold drafts coming through your older windows. Because the people who built this country with their hands knew things we are only just starting to remember.